Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Nick from TenacityCloud.com with my co-host Jason, and you're listening to the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. More people than ever before are building cool stuff in the cloud and spending a lot of money doing it. On this show, we discuss cloud optimization trends, deep dive into the technology, talk to experts living in the cloud-native hyperscale world to learn from their experiences and understand their strategies. Welcome to episode 1. In this episode, I'll be interviewing my co-host to learn a little more about Jason's background and frame up the 3 pillars of a solid cloud cost optimization program. Jason, it's our first show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in technology and cloud computing?
Yeah, I've been in cloud for pretty much my entire career, now going on about 20 years. That's how old we are getting in this arena. So we were like in its infancy in cloud. So I've seen a lot of changes in the industry. Have loved AWS, Azure, and those types of public clouds since they've come out, and really love the benefits and all the flexibility they give you. But I've seen over and over again in my past how much this stuff can cost and how badly the security can get out of control if you don't have the right tools and processes in place. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I remember the early days of setting up my first, ESX hosts, and what was it, GSX? Was GSX before that? Those hosts. And I mean, we had the same problems, like sprawl and cost and buying hardware. It was all the same sorts of problems.
I remember the first sprawl. I mean, there was sprawl before that, but when virtualization came out, everybody just spun a virtual machine up for every application. It was like the first. Everyone. I'll just spin up a new virtual machine for this. It's like, and then all of a sudden you had, hundreds of virtual machines. Yeah, they're the same problems, just at a different scale that we've seen for
every
20
junk
years.
server we could find. Every single junk server we could find, we threw cloud hosting software on. That was prior to the AWS and Azure days, but that sort of changed everything. So why focus on cloud cost optimization? What gives?
Well, I mean, listen, for as long as I can remember, every year, every report that comes out, it's estimated that 30+% of cloud spend is waste. And when you think about the revenue of just say AWS in particular, $50 billion before the pandemic hit, 30% of that's a pretty big number. I think they're going to be close to $80 billion in annual revenue after the pandemic because, we just saw, people needed to get stuff up pretty quickly to support remote work. And, so we saw a huge rush into the public cloud during the pandemic. It's estimated to be $80 billion now. And the percentage of wasted spend is not estimated to go down. In fact, it goes up almost every year. And we think companies should be paying for what they're using and not, just lining the pockets of billionaires.
Yeah, we like to. Our pithy statement is, don't get ripped off by your cloud provider, right? They're not telling you where the waste is. They tell you
waste has this time. You specifically what they want you to save. That's it. What they want you to save. That's what they tell you.
That's right. Waste has this time function to it where, it's an over time, sort of expansion. And there's these thresholds that we see, when an organization gets to about 1 year in their cloud journey, 2 years into their cloud journey, you can start to find really significant kind of abandonment of infrastructure. And it's from a number of different places. One is just rate of change. I mean, just dozens, sometimes hundreds of changes a day in these organizations results in things that just get left behind. It happens. Or things that are configured incorrectly. That's a fairly common issue. 2 is that legacy infrastructure as cloud deployment patterns evolve because they almost certainly start at a very simple deployment strategy when you're going through digital transformation, when you're going through your cloud migration, and then you start to discover the power of cloud and you adapt and evolve your cloud deployment, cloud infrastructure. A lot of legacy infrastructure can get left behind. Sometimes it's the safeguard of let's just leave it there just in case, and we'll delete it in 30 days, I promise, cross my fingers. But it doesn't, that cleanup oftentimes just never materializes, or the infrastructure is forgotten and it lays around. So waste sort of gathers over time, this time function. Outside of waste, I think that there is, significant opportunity for savings in really, managing committed use discounts. And I think this is, I guess the right word for it is confusing. It's oftentimes confusing to the end user. And we see, in, our deployments that oftentimes, only around 10 to 15% of consumers are actually making some sophisticated use of committed use discounts. They may be, there's a broader percentage that are, potentially picking a committed use discount, but they're using a very simple strategy of just throw one savings plan at it, pick the simplest one and go. They try not to get caught up in the analysis paralysis, which a lot of people do, but really only 10 to 15% of consumers are actually, have a committed use discount strategy. Can you talk a little bit about that difficulty and why there's confusion?
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with a lot of those committed discount vehicles that the providers have are based on information that hasn't necessarily been available to, say, the FinOps team or the Cloud Center of Excellence or Cloud Cost Optimization team, right? So as an example, reserved instances are, specifically for persistent workloads, things that use a lot of compute all the time. And so you tend to need contextual information to select the best commitment vehicles. Vehicles, by the way, it's typically more than one in all of them that you should be utilizing. And so what oftentimes happens is that companies choose to deploy the easiest one, right? The one that covers the most broad category. It's the easiest. It makes you feel good. You save 10 or 15%. Heck, it makes the provider feel great too, because you're only saving 10 or 15%. And they know if you really unlocked the true power of these vehicles, you could be saving 40%. Up to 40%, maybe even more in some cases. It just depends on what your workload is like. So you need to kind of have that contextual information married so that you can understand usage, workload type, how these things are being utilized. And you also need to go through and do some optimization first, because you don't want to buy discount vehicles on overutilized things or underutilized things, right? It's not going to be, so you need to have you need to marry the usage information with the cost information to make the best decision on all of the commitment vehicles to use. And it's really difficult to do with the tools you're given. Like I said, AWS gives you all the tools to save this money, but they show you what they want you to save. It just is what it is. We would expect it. And so that's the reason why.
Well, and you have to be even more careful with Azure. It's not as sophisticated. There's not as many tools to use from a committed use discount perspective, but there's also not a mature marketplace by which you can buy and sell and trade when you need to change them. So there it takes a little more forecasting and a little more foreknowledge, a little more tuning up front to select the right plan to make sure that you're maximizing your savings from an Azure perspective as well. So you and I have touched on, in the past, and I think it's important to cover here, really what's the foundation of a good cloud cost optimization program? What are those three pillars? And, it starts with, really understanding everything you have. What are all the puts and takes? What are the inputs to the system? What creates change? So having that kind of, big picture, what all is there. And it's kind of surprising. I know you'll touch on this, but it's kind of surprising how often folks don't have that big picture in their organization. They really are kind of blind to parts of it or what's going on in parts of it. Two is, the accountability side of it is who owns what pieces and is therefore responsible for it. So, you got this cost allocation, charge back, bill back, show back component to it, or from a partner perspective, accurately invoicing customers. That's we've seen that be an issue over and over and over in our conversations and in our deployments. In the third piece of this is really just making use of the right tool sets and the right strategies around managing discounts and cleaning up waste, abandonment, idle, right sizing resources and so so on, we've seen folks go from having a baseline of a few percentage points or even 10 or 15% savings in their environments to actually being able to manage 30, 40 plus percent savings ongoing because they have a sophisticated strategy around how to actually, get those discounts and manage that environment. Tell us a little bit about sort of, your thoughts on, what you have to tackle first. What are some of the lessons learned in seeing this in the wild?
All starts with visibility. If it's really difficult to implement a good commitment management strategy if you don't know what you have and you're not working with a base set of infrastructure that you need. And honestly, it is something that we see often is that, show me a list or show me where I can see everything that you've deployed across all your organizations, accounts, regions, subscriptions, tenants, whatever it may be. And that's not easy to do. And that's the basis of what you need to make sure that, one, you have just the things that you need out there, right? Because we don't want to be paying for infrastructure we're not using, so that you can move on to the next steps like optimizing for the right types of storage, compute, et cetera, and then on to commitment management, because you don't want to be committing to compute usage, as an example, that you don't need. You could be measuring a baseline of things. Your baseline could be 20% higher than what you actually need because you have abandoned resources or you have underutilized resources. So it all starts with visibility. It's very simple to do. You can do it in 5 minutes from our website and have a manifest list of everything that you have in your environment. That's the first thing to do.
I think, that's a really good point is there is kind of a strategy 1 to, 3 or 1 to maybe even 5 or 10, steps in this process of actually getting it right. And the more closely you align to that strategy and the faster you move through it, you actually get to potential savings much, much faster. So, I think organizations that kind of get stuck, just getting the visibility piece right, and there's all sorts of tools out there to use to get visibility, but it's really important to nail that right off the bat. Understand what you have so you know what to clean up before you go start committing to committed discount programs. Well, I think that wraps our show for today. So thank you so much, Jason. It's fun being able to have this conversation actually on recording. These conversations happen all the time between us, but
we should just record all of our conversations, Nick. We should record all of our conversations. No one want to listen to that. It'll be a different podcast. It would be the Cloud Cost Optimization podcast.
Be a very different podcast, a whole lot of debates and arguments, which is what founders do. So anyway, that's it for today. Tune in to the Cloud Cost Optimization podcast. We'll be dropping content twice a week. We look forward to your feedback and to have some of you all on the show as well. So thanks. Keep tuning in. Go out to tenacitycloud.com for your free assessment, and we would love to have the chance to show you how to optimize your environment.